you've shared some fascinating research with us about how people really talk when they think no one is listening.
And today we're taking a deep dive into a collection of conversations captured on Zello. Basically, it's a walkie-talkie app.
So like a modern-day CB radio.
Yeah, exactly. People can chat in these public channels right on their smartphones.
So it's not a podcast, it's not a private call. What makes Zello so unique as a source for this kind of research?
It's the anonymity of it all. Even though it's a public channel, there's a layer of remove. People tend to be surprisingly candid, more than they would be in other settings.
Interesting. So it's almost like you're getting a glimpse into their stream of consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. And we've analyzed hundreds of hours of these conversations, and it's amazing what people talk about when given this kind of platform.
I bet. So what are people talking about? What kind of themes bubble to the surface when you have that level of anonymity?
You might expect it to be totally random, right? And while the range of topics is really broad, there's a definite theme: connection. Whether they're debating the news or just chatting about the weather, you see this deep-seated human need for real-world interaction.
Yeah, it makes you think. Even with all the ways we can connect online, that human need for connection hasn't gone away.
No, it hasn't. And what's interesting is how that need manifests in the specifics of these conversations. We came across passionate theological debates right alongside detailed instructions for making ramen noodle casserole.
Okay, I have to admit, the juxtaposition of theology and ramen noodle recipes is intriguing. What else? What other unexpected topics came up?
Oh, you name it. We found DIY advice, relationship dilemmas, even conspiracy theories. It really highlights how multifaceted human experience is.
You mentioned conspiracy theories. In your notes, you highlighted one conversation in particular about chemtrails.
Oh, right. There was this one speaker utterly convinced about chemtrails. I mean, he was going on about barium, aluminum, LED, strontium, toxic death being rained on us from above.
Wow. That level of conviction is something else. You can really hear it in his voice. It wasn't just a casual comment. He was completely invested. It's not just about the content of the conversation, though. What I find fascinating is what happened next.
Exactly. It's about how people react to each other. In this case, some listeners engaged with this theory, some pushed back, and others were just silent. You see the different ways people navigate differing viewpoints, even in a space like this.
It's like a microcosm of the internet, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see that same range of responses from passionate debate to silent observation playing out every day on social media.
You got it. And just like with those other online spaces, we found that the perceived anonymity of Zello encouraged a certain unfiltered style of communication.
By unfiltered, you mean?
Well, let's just say there's colorful language, off-the-cuff remarks, the kind of bluntness you wouldn't normally hear in, say, a job interview. For instance, one speaker, clearly frustrated with a client, just blurts out, "Why in the world are they calling me out there again? They know better."
Mm-hmm.
And it's that rawness that I find so compelling. It gives us this glimpse into people's, immediate frustrations and anxieties, even aspirations.
Things they might not necessarily share in their, more curated online personas.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. When we think about online communication, we often picture carefully crafted posts or perfectly edited photos.
Right, like the Instagram versus reality phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly. But this Zello data, it strips all that away and shows us something much more, human. We see ourselves in these conversations, even though they're with complete strangers.
Absolutely. It reminds us that we all experience those same kinds of frustrations, those moments of doubt or uncertainty.
In the pre-show notes, you mentioned a quote from one of the recordings, something about electronic courses.
Oh, right. It was from this truck driver. He was talking about his daily route, and kind of in passing, he mentions, "I've been thinking about those electronic courses."
It's such a small detail, but it speaks volumes. It makes you wonder what else is going on in his life, what dreams or aspirations he might have beyond his current situation.
Exactly. It's like you get this glimpse into his inner monologue, this private world of thoughts and desires.
And that's what I find so amazing about this kind of research. It's like a window into the unfiltered human experience, capturing those unguarded moments, the stuff we don't usually get to hear.
It's fascinating from a sociological perspective, but I'm curious about the more practical side of things. How do you even go about analyzing such a massive and, let's be honest, messy data set? I imagine it's quite different from, say, looking at structured data like survey responses.
It's definitely a different beast. One of the biggest challenges is just the sheer volume of data. We're talking about hundreds of hours of audio, which takes a lot of time and resources to transcribe and analyze.
It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the haystack is made of words, and there could be thousands of needles representing different patterns and insights.
That's a great analogy. And then there's the challenge of context. Often we don't have any background information about the speakers, their relationships, the situations they're in. It's like piecing together a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
So how do you make sense of it all? How do you fill in those gaps?
That's where technology comes in. Researchers are using things like machine learning and natural language processing to analyze these huge amounts of data. These tools can identify patterns in language, track how often certain words or phrases pop up, and even map out those conversational networks in a way that would be impossible for a human to do on their own.
So the machines aren't replacing human researchers. They're actually helping them to dive deeper into this complex world of human communication.
Exactly. It's about using the best of both worlds. Human intuition and insight combined with the raw processing power of machines.
It makes you think, this kind of research could really shake up our understanding of how we communicate online.
Absolutely. We tend to think of online communication as being very well curated.
Right, people presenting a certain image of themselves.
Exactly. But these XZELLO conversations, they're different. They're raw, unfiltered, unpolished. It's refreshing, really.
It's like the difference between, say, a carefully staged photograph and a candid snapshot.
Yes, and it reminds us that there are these spaces online where people aren't so concerned with crafting an image.
They're just looking for authentic connection, even if it's messy or unpredictable.
Exactly. Speaking of which, in the pre-show notes, you mentioned a conversation where someone was trying to explain what a podcast is.
Oh, right. It was the XZELLO user who had clearly never encountered the concept of podcasting before, and he was talking to someone who was trying to explain it to him.
I can only imagine, how do you even begin to explain something so foreign to someone's experience?
That's what I thought was so interesting about it. The guy trying to explain podcasts, he's comparing it to talk radio, to audiobooks, even to a book, but you listen to it.
Did the other guy get it?
Eventually, the guy just throws his hands up and says, you just got to listen to one yourself. It was this moment of, acknowledging that some things just can't be explained.
I love that. Sometimes you just have to experience something firsthand to really understand it.
Exactly. Which makes me wonder, what will these XZELLO conversations sound like in 5-10 years? Will we still be talking about the same things? Will those fundamental human needs still be driving our conversations, even as technology changes around us?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? And I think if this XZELLO data tells us anything, it's that some things are just universal. The need for connection, the search for meaning, the desire to share our experiences. Those are threads that run through all of these conversations.
It's almost comforting, in a way, to know that in a world that's constantly changing, some things remain constant.
I think so too. It's a good reminder that even when we feel alone, we're all connected by these shared human experiences.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap things up here. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a fascinating conversation.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about this stuff.